Not too many IndyCar fans will recognize the name Laurent Redon. Now, I can certainly see why that's the case, considering that he only competed in IndyCar for a season and change. It also doesn't help that his time in the series came over 20 years ago, deep in the trenches of the kart Indy Racing League split. Although the Frenchman didn't have a flashy career by any means, it's still a story that should be told. So today, I revisit Laurent Redon's Indy Racing League career. The story starts in 2001, and in the summer that year, Laurent was running in sports cars, both in Europe and the US. However, later in 2001, he would make his IndyCar debut. This came with Conquest Racing, a team that was also new to IndyCar. Owner Eric Bachelart, who had also run in American open wheel racing back in the 90s, picked Laurent for the drive. On September 2nd, 2001, the Indy Racing League would race in Chicagoland for race number 12 of the 2001 IndyCar season. The track had opened back in July, and this would be the first IndyCar race at the Speedway. Laurent would qualify for the race in 13th, a pretty decent performance at the 25 cars in the field. In the race itself, he'd eventually finish 7th, a pretty good performance too. However, it is worth noting that 5 of the cars that started ahead of him would fail to finish, all with mechanical issues. Along with that, Laurent would eventually finish 1 lap down. However, Chicago went better than Texas a month later, where he qualified second to last and would have an engine failure on lap 168, leaving him in 11th place. By the rule of averages, it was a frankly mediocre pair of races to cap off 2001, but despite that fact, Laurent would get the nod to race for the team full-time in 2002. He was set to have his first documented full-time season in motorsport since his F3000 season in 1997. However, this season, like his races at the end of last year, would be mediocre and inconsistent, with 2 key highlights which we'll get to in a bit. Homestead, Miami was the site for race number 1 of the season, and it wouldn't be a good start to the year for Redon. He started 9th, his best IndyCar start yet, but would eventually finish the race in 15th. At least he saw the checkered flag in Miami, something that can't be said about race number 2 in Phoenix, where he would have yet another engine failure. A week after Phoenix, the series rolled up to Fontana, where Laurent Redon would have easily his best race in IndyCar. After qualifying 5th alongside Jeff Ward, Laurent would finish 3rd. This race would be both his only IndyCar podium and his only IndyCar top 5. With that last quote, it won't shock you when I say that this podium won't be a turning point for both team and driver. It was business as usual in Nazareth, as he finished 15th 4 laps down. In Indy, he'd crash with Buddy Lazier on lap 199. Those familiar with Indy history know the controversy to spawn from that crash, and deciding who's the actual winner of the race. But lost in the fallout to follow from this crash was the crash itself. Laurent would actually sustain a minor concussion in the accident, however he'd be cleared to race the next week in Texas. He would start a career-best 4th before retiring again with another mechanical issue. He'd finish 7th in Pikes Peak, then crash with Eddie Cheever in Richmond. He'd have yet another mechanical failure in Kansas, before finishing 16th and 11th in Nashville and Michigan. In the next 3 races, he'd have 2 engine failures and another crash. Finally, in the second Texas race to round off the 2002 IndyCar season, he would actually break into the top 10, finishing 10th. With 8 DNFs, only 3 lead lap finishes, an average finish of 15.7 and a 12th place points finish, Laurent would actually get Rookie of the Year this year, barely beating out Thomas Scheckter, who didn't even show up for the last 3 races after getting fired by Red Bull Cheever. Outside the 3rd place run at Fontana and being involved in the crash from Indy in 2002, Laurent Redon's IndyCar career was pretty forgettable if we're being honest. His career would end with IndyCar, as he then retired after the birth of his daughter after that season. He then ran a team in the short-lived Super League Formula Series, where in 2010 they scored 1 victory with Sébastien Bourdais. Laurent Redon's name may be mud to most IndyCar fans, but he wasn't a bad driver, and his career was surprisingly influential for a guy who only saw the checkered flag 8 times. Thank you for watching, and have a great afternoon.